Have you ever wondered about the complexities of relationships and what it really means to trust someone? Sometimes, the deepest lessons come from stories that make us question our own beliefs and assumptions. Let me tell you a story that might make you reflect on the true meaning of trust. In a small town in the heart of Vermont, surrounded by mountains covered in forests and tranquil lakes, lived a woman named Marion. The town, with its quaint houses and cobblestone streets, was a place where everyone knew each other and each person's stories were shared like precious treasures. Marion, an 80-year-old woman, was the guardian of these stories. Her gray hair and calm presence made her a respected figure, someone people turned to when they needed advice. One particularly beautiful autumn, with the leaves of the trees tinged in orange and red, a young woman named Abigail went to visit Marion. Abigail was a determined woman, but there was something that deeply troubled her, something she needed to discuss with someone she could trust. "Mrs. Marion," she began, her voice laden with doubt, "I'm struggling with a question I can't resolve on my own. There's something I heard recently that has me confused. Never trust a woman who has done certain things. And it's been bothering me." Marion, with the patience that only experience brings, smiled gently and invited Abigail to sit in a rocking chair next to the fireplace. The warmth of the fire and the crackling of the flames created a cozy atmosphere. "My dear," said Marion, her voice soft and reassuring, "often, we are confronted with ideas and beliefs that make us question the people around us. Let me tell you a story that may help you see things differently." Marion adjusted her teacup and began to tell her story. "Many years ago, I met a woman named Margaret. Margaret was fascinating, full of life, and had an inner strength that drew everyone around her. She had a complex past, and like many of us, her life experiences shaped who she was. Margaret was married to a man named Edward, a kind man, but one who carried his own insecurities. Edward had always been very careful about who he let into his life, especially after hearing advice from a friend, never trust a woman who has done certain things. This advice stayed with him, creating an invisible barrier between him and Margaret, even though he tried to ignore it. Abigail listened attentively, her hands resting in her lap as she tried to absorb every detail. Marion continued, "Margaret was a woman who had lived intensely, and in her youth, she had made choices that Edward judged severely, even without ever admitting it to her. But Margaret, being the wise woman she was, always knew there was something that troubled him, something he could never overcome. One night, during a walk along the lake that bordered the town, Margaret felt it was time to confront the issue that hung between them. She stopped at the edge of the lake, the moon's reflection shimmering on the calm water, and looked at Edward with a sincerity that was impossible to ignore. "Edward," she said, her voice steady but full of tenderness, "there's something you need to understand about me, about us." Edward, feeling the weight of the conversation he was about to have, looked at her with a mix of love and fear. "I know you've heard many things about what women should or shouldn't do, and that you have your own beliefs about what is right and wrong," Margaret continued. "But the truth is that the experiences I've lived, the choices I've made, have shaped who I am today. They do not define my character, but they have helped me grow and learn." Marion paused, allowing the story to penetrate Abigail's heart. Margaret explained to Edward that a person's true character is not defined by a single act or experience, but by how they choose to live their life, how they treat others, and how they face challenges. "Trusting someone shouldn't be based on their past," she said, "but rather on what that person demonstrates every day. In love, honesty, and integrity." Edward, touched by Margaret's words, began to realize that his insecurities were unfounded. He saw that by allowing an old and misunderstood counsel to govern his feelings, he was harming the woman he loved and the relationship they had built together. "Margaret," he said, with tears in his eyes, "forgive me for letting these thoughts cloud my vision of who you really are. Abigail felt a lump in her throat as she listened to Marian speak. The story of Margaret and Edward resonated deeply within her, making her reconsider the assumptions she had made about trust and character. "So," Abigail said, her voice trembling, "shouldn't we judge a person only by their past experiences?" Marian smiled, a smile full of understanding and kindness. "Exactly, my dear. A person's past is part of who they are, but it does not define them completely. We must learn to trust what we see every day, in their actions, their words, and the love that is shown. Judging someone by something they did in the past is like trying to measure the depth of a river by its surface alone. There is much more beneath than we can see." In the days that followed, Abigail reflected on the story of Margaret and Edward. She realized that true trust did not come from judging others based on their experiences, but from understanding and accepting that everyone has a past, and that it is the present that truly matters. Trust, she discovered, was something that was built over time, with patience and love. Abigail began to apply this new understanding in her own life, looking at the people around her with different, more compassionate eyes. She understood that the true character of someone is revealed in small everyday actions, in the choices we make every day, and not in isolated moments from the past. Marian, observing Abigail from afar, felt a quiet satisfaction in seeing the young woman find peace in her new perspective. She knew that the story of Margaret and Edward would continue to resonate in Abigail, just as it did in all those who heard their words. Marian continued to guide the community with her wisdom, helping people to see beyond appearances and to understand the true nature of trust. Thus, the small town in Vermont remained a place where stories were told with purpose, where wisdom was passed down from generation to generation, and where each person learned to value character and integrity above all else. Marian, with her experience and kindness, continued to be a light for those seeking answers, helping them find their own truths through the stories she told. If this story touched your heart and you believe in the importance of looking beyond appearances to truly understand who people are, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Together, we will continue exploring the many facets of relationships and trust. Until next time.